Today on Fear and Greed, interest rates in Australia could fall as soon as next month after inflation slows sharply. Wine exports to China jump, but sales to many other markets fall. And we'll tell you the best time to buy a cheap domestic and international flight. Plus, the local share market closes in on a record high, and Boeing crashes to its second largest loss ever. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Thursday, the 30th of January, 2025. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, the main story is one that we've been talking about for some time. It's finally here. Inflation has fallen to its lowest level in nearly 4 years. The consensus among market economists is that the Reserve Bank will start cutting interest rates next month.
That's right. The details first. The Australian Bureau of Statistics Consumer Price Index was released yesterday morning. The headline figure for the December quarter, 0.2%. For the annual rate of inflation for 2024, 2.4%. Now, that's artificially low because of energy rebates from the government. Housing costs are also lower. That reading is the lowest since March 2021. The more important reading, Michael, is the underlying rate. That's what the Reserve Bank cares about when it's thinking about interest rates. 0.5% for the quarter, 3.2% for the year. That's down from 3.5%. That figure may well be enough to start interest rate cuts. The Reserve Bank Governor Michelle Bullock has said she will start cutting rates when she believes underlying inflation is heading sustainably into the 2 to 3% target band. Well, 3.2% down from 3.5%. Looks like it is heading in that direction. Yesterday, Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers said a soft landing for the economy is more and more likely. He said we are making substantial and sustained progress on inflation. A load of market economists now believe a rate cut is likely next month, including Westpac's chief economist Lucy Ellis, who changed her view on the back of yesterday's data. Ellis, of course, used to be the Reserve Bank's chief economist. The Commonwealth Bank and ANZ already were at the position that they thought there would be a rate cut next month. The Aussie dollar fell sharply towards 62 US cents after the announcement. Basically, the Aussie dollar becomes relatively less attractive to global investors when rates fall. The 3-year bond yield hit a 2-month low of 3.79%. What's that mean? Well, it tells us what you're laughing at me, what investors think will happen to rates. They reckon they're going down.
Sean, digesting all of that, right?
Yes.
People with mortgages must be happy. People with business loans must be happy. And I don't want to be a cynic here, right? But I reckon the happiest person in the country today would have to be Prime Minister Anthony Albanese.
So true. A rate cut next month ahead of a federal poll in coming months will do him no harm whatsoever. Now, it's worth noting that a rate cut is not a done deal. But the readings yesterday are lower than the central bank's forecasts. The central bank meets on February 17, 18. It could quite easily justify no change. It could say, we want to ensure inflation is under control. Yep, it all looks pretty good, but we'll just wait a little bit longer. It could talk about economies like the US, signs of inflation there, global trade wars, all that sort of stuff.
They have kind of built that kind of room to do that, to wait a bit longer into all of the previous commentary, isn't it? Because Michelle Bullock has said so many times that it is all about getting inflation down sustainably. Yep. And Sean, you're full of lots of things. You're full of kind of sayings and things like kind of the trend is your friend and one swallow, something doesn't make a spring. I don't know. You could see the Reserve Bank saying, hey, we want to see this playing out for a longer period, right?
Yeah, you could. There's also an enormous amount of political pressure going on, though. And maybe sort of covertly from government, but overtly from other groups. So Sally McManus from the ACTU yesterday was out saying, you've got to cut rates. There are plenty of other business leaders saying, yep, it's time to cut rates. So Michelle Bullock and the board at the Reserve Bank have to put up with that. The next question will be, how many rate cuts are we going to get? And you don't tend to get one rate cut or one rate hike. They come in clumps. So economists are saying maybe 2 or 3 rate cuts this year. But I'm not totally convinced that it's going to happen, Michael. Got to be honest.
No, The political pressure or the pressure from other areas is such an interesting idea, isn't it? Because you would think that, of course, when you've got then the chief economists of various banks, everything all saying, yep, it'll happen. Surely that's got to kind of weigh on you if you were the Reserve Bank board, right?
Well, maybe. I think it's a pressure from government, from ACTU. It's those sorts of organisations that probably put more pressure on you. Actually, today's interview, it's with Warren Hogan from Judo Bank. It is a great chat, not just about yesterday's data, but exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And he has a great track record on interest rates.
Yeah. And he basically takes this approach of kind of, we don't need a rate cut, and here's why.
Yeah.
And it's the thing I love about Warren is that he just tells it exactly as he kind of sees it. He is so plain spoken with all of this. He doesn't pull any punches. He just lets you know exactly where he stands. So it is a great conversation if you want to understand kind of what he sees as the picture at the moment. Sean, ASX. How did local markets react to the news? What was the response?
Very quickly, they loved it. The market finished up 0.6% to 8,447 points. That's less than 1% off its all-time high of late last year. Straight after the announcement, it actually jumped up even higher than that. Basically, lower rates should help consumers in the cost of living crisis. As a result, they should buy more stuff. That helps corporate profits. Makes sense. Also, the cost of corporate debt will fall if rates are lower. So those two things together, you get higher earnings, that pushes up share prices. There was another important factor, however, influencing trading yesterday, Michael. It was the day after the day before. Not sure how that works. But, it's the day after the massive sell-off on Wall Street and in tech stocks because of the news about DeepSeek. Now, DeepSeek is essentially a company that's going to take on ChatGPT. That's the theory behind it. What it did more than anything was just show that there are other competitors out there to the big US tech groups. Some of the companies that were sold off big time on Tuesday, I think the data center groups Goodman and NextDC, the tech leaders WiseTech Global and Xero, they pretty much bounced yesterday. Same deal with a bunch of uranium stocks like Boss Energy and Deep Yellow. And just before we leave the markets, Michael, Premier Investment yesterday became a much smaller company because, of course, it's combining its apparel business, think Just Jeans, Portman's, JJ's, with Myer. So its share price fell 22% yesterday. Not surprising because it's lost all those assets. Myer was down 5%.
All right, big start to the show, Sean. We still have plenty more to come. We are talking Aussie wine exports. We are looking at the best time to book a flight with Boeing's bad run, very aircraft and airline heavy.
Aircraft, yeah,
it's
it
very
is
nice.
true.
Feels like you've kind of prepared today's show just for me. So much more to come. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Australian soldier Oscar Jenkins, who was captured in eastern Ukraine, has been confirmed alive and in custody, not dead as was previously feared.
Certainly good news. The 32-year-old Melbourne teacher was serving in Ukraine's armed forces. He was captured by Russian forces last year. There were reports that he had been executed in Russia. Yesterday, Foreign Minister Penny Wong said he was alive, but she also threatened an unequivocal response against Russia should Mr. Jenkins face harm, citing serious concerns for his well-being. Not a lot of information on this at the moment, but at least Mr. Jenkins is alive. He's a prisoner of war. Now, Penny Wong yesterday called on the government to release Mr. Jenkins. She said if Russia doesn't provide Mr. Jenkins the protections he's entitled to under international humanitarian law, our response will be unequivocal.
All right. Now, Sean, I mentioned Australian wine exports. Well, they jumped by more than 1/3 last year to $2.55 billion, thanks to the abolition of Chinese tariffs on the local drop.
There was an immediate improvement from late March last year when those tariffs were dropped. In fact, for the full year, wine sales to China were up 34%. That took the total value of exports to $2.55 billion last year, according to Wine Australia. Now, China takes about 36% of all exports. That's the good news. The bad news exports to the rest of the world slipped by about 13%. There were big drops in some major markets. So the United Kingdom was down 3%, the US was down 10%, Hong Kong was down 40%. There would have been a bit of shifting from Hong Kong to China in that. But those three, UK, US and Hong Kong, are all major markets for us. Broadly, wine exports are facing challenges. Health and wellness concerns, rising cost of living have combined to hit demand for our exports. Also, there's a global oversupply at the moment. That's not helping prices. So tough times, but at least sales to China are up.
Yeah, that is at least some good news. Now, Sean, shareholder meetings to approve the Sigma Healthcare and Chemist Warehouse merger were held last night, and it got the green light to create a $30 billion company.
That's right. Sigma is listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. Shareholders love the deal. Basically, it's triggered a total re-rating of Sigma Healthcare. Before this deal was announced, Sigma was trading at 76.5 cents a share. On Tuesday's close, didn't trade yesterday, but Tuesday was its last day as a standalone entity, $3.03. Certainly a strong performer in the second half of last year. Chemist Warehouse is a family-owned business, or mostly family-owned. Any deal will make the founders, Jack and Sam Grants, as well as Mario Verrocchi, billionaires. Combined, those three own about 48% of the company. That's worth about $15 billion. So, not surprising, they voted for the deal as well. Shares are set to begin trading on 13th of February. Because the new company is so big, plenty of index funds, index investors will be forced to buy into the company, and that should support its price.
Bit of rare good news now, Sean, for Star Entertainment. Yesterday, it said that it is selling several Sydney assets, and that sent its share price up 13%.
Wow, I like that. Star selling several Sydney assets.
A lot of assets. A lot of sibilance.
Yes, exactly. The main asset being sold is the Star Sydney Event Centre, plus some other spaces. Star will reap about $60 billion. I'd love that. Star will reap about $60 million for the assets. They've sold it to the Foundation Theatres. Foundation already has a sublease on Lyric Theatre at the Star in Sydney. Of course, this is part of Star's efforts to avoid collapse. I've got to say, when I saw this story yesterday, I remember when Star in Sydney opened in 1995 at a temporary site, and they built the permanent casino. That opened in 1997. So I must be about 96, early 97. I was a journalist at the Fin Review, and I went on a tour of the Star before it opened. And I went into that Sydney Event Centre, and I think it's got 200 or 300 people capacity. And they were talking about Elton John and David Bowie and all sorts of people coming and having kind of small, intimate shows for very rich gamblers.
Oh, wow.
I remember at the time thinking to myself, really? Like, maybe that happened. I have never heard of it happening. But really, do you think Elton John's going to come and play for 200 people unless you're going to pay him a lot of money?
A lot of money. It does feel like there's been a few missteps along the way, because then you think about the fact that the entire decision to build the casino facing the wrong way, and that then required them to do this massive remodeling,
I forgot about that. Yeah,
huge refurbishment to basically turn it around to focus more on the fact that it is on the water.
On Sydney Harbour.
It's on Sydney Harbour. And the back of the casino backs onto the harbour. And so what was that, probably about 10 years ago? 10 to 15 years ago, there was the big, huge redevelopment in order to basically spin it around and make more of its location. So there have been a few bumps along the way for Star Entertainment.
They have the current CEO, Steve McCann, yesterday said the company continues to work on a number of potential non-core asset transactions. Yesterday morning, the Fin Review reported that New York behemoth Cerberus, have I got that right? Cerberus, Cerberus, Capital Management, is interested in buying some of the group's debt. What's important about that is that probably gives it an extension of that debt. So very relevant.
Cerberus is the one with the dog with the three heads, isn't it?
Is it? I can't remember off the top of my head.
You know, big on your Greek mythology, or
no?
Maybe I don't know. Who would have thought that we'd be discussing Greek mythology in today's podcast, Sean? Maybe let's stick to business. What about this one? What do you make of this? The boss of Pilbara Minerals has called the bottom of the lithium market He says that prices the producer is now receiving are better than early last year. That sounds like a big call, though, don't you think?
Yeah, look, nickel sector was probably hit hardest, but lithium was next over the last couple of years. They said there's had this oversupply and then lower demand for electric vehicles. Prices fell. We ended up having a bunch of companies, including Pilbara, mothballing plants. Well, yesterday, Chief Executive Dale Henderson came out. He said that Pilbara, which is Australia's biggest pure lithium play, was actually receiving higher prices, or did so in the December quarter, and he called it an inflection point. His theory is that the EV freight train is off and running. Off and running is how he put it. That's not going to stop, according to Mr. Henderson. So he reckons that we're at an inflection point. For his sake and for Pilbara Minerals and all the lithium miners, I hope that's the case.
Cerberus is a three-headed dog in Greek mythology.
Oh, well done.
His role is
Well
to
done.
guard the gates of Hades and allow dead people in, but no one out. There you go. Sorry,
Excellent.
I wouldn't normally revisit something if I was wrong. But if
Yeah.
I'm right, then
Absolutely.
got to give
Go for
myself
it.
a bit of credit here. Sean, booking an international airfare on a Sunday night, 8 weeks in advance, and flying on a Thursday, preferably in January. I hope you're taking notes here. That is the best way to save money on airfares.
Now that's according to Expedia's report called Air Hacks. It looked at was literally tens of thousands of bookings across its site, across carriers. It found that booking on a Sunday saved as much as 17% off international fares, 20% off domestic fares. So Sunday lunch, that's what you should be doing, thinking about booking somewhere to go. If you fly overseas on a Thursday, you can save about 8%. If you fly domestically on a Saturday, you can save about 27%. January is the cheapest month for domestic and international flights. It's about 11% less than September, which is the most expensive month. The quietest month for air travel is February. So if you don't want to get stuck in the middle of 4 seats in the middle of the plane, try February. And in terms of booking ahead, everyone says you've got to book months and months ahead internationally. Well, according to Air Hacks, 8 weeks for international is prime, 6 months for domestic.
That requires a lot of decisions to be made in advance, though, Sean.
And organisation.
Yeah, that's tough. Turning to international news now, Wall Street was somewhat calmer yesterday. You touched on this before, Sean, with the market rebounding from the emergence of Chinese AI player DeepSeek.
Nvidia and Oracle, which lost hundreds of billions of dollars worth of value on Tuesday night, rebounded pretty sharply. Now, the latest on that DeepSeek story is that Microsoft and OpenAI, which own ChatGPT, are now investigating whether data output from the group was obtained in an unauthorized manner by a group linked to DeepSeek. That, to me, sounds like they don't believe that DeepSeek can do what it did without some sort of help. Anyway, I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about that story. The rebound meant Wall Street closed higher.
Sean, the turbulence for Boeing continues.
Here we go.
It's just,
Pun city.
There are lazy puns to make about kind of airlines, aren't there? But Boeing has crashed to its second largest annual loss in its 109-year history as the plane maker deals with the fallout of a major safety scandal. This has been ongoing now for some time.
That's right. So it lost $11.8 billion US dollars last year, 19 billion Aussie dollars. How do you do that? It has lost more, but that was during the pandemic. So outside that year in the pandemic, where it basically couldn't sell any planes, outside that year, by far the worst year it's ever had. Its total losses over the past 5 years is now $35 billion. Ouch. Terrible year 2024. It had a mid-air blowout of a door plug in one of its passenger aircraft. That didn't help. There were walkouts by tens of thousands of factory workers at the Boeing factories. There were a string of faults aboard a spacecraft it built for NASA. Ennis Horribilis. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you did.
Ennis Horribilis for Boeing.
Oh, Finishing the show on a bit of Latin. God, we've had Latin, we've had Greek mythology, we've had a little bit of everything today. Sean.
You can learn lots of things on Fear and Greed that have got nothing to do with the economy or business.
They should play this podcast in primary schools right around the country.
Maybe it's sleep time for the infants kids.
Yeah, pop you all off to sleep, kiddies. Up next, Fear and Greed Daily interview with Warren Hogan. Definitely worth a listen. All about the inflation figures yesterday. It is coming up in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Thursday, the 30th of January 2025. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.